Hello, and welcome back to Poetry Lockdown. We're at day 200, if my count is correct, which it often isn't, so who knows. We're well into the Poetry Lockdown, though. So I'm bringing a poem today to you that was originally written in German by a poet, playwright, novelist named Peter Handke. And this poem I first heard, I didn't read it, but I first heard it in the beautiful film by Wim Wenders, Wings of Desire. If you haven't ever seen that, I really recommend it. Hard to really describe the plot because it's a little crazy, but basically it's a story told from the perspective of angels, kind of like guardian angels, and they're in post World War II by a good deal, like maybe 25 or 30 years after World War II, Germany. Anyways, it's very mystical. There's funny moments, sad, serious, joyous. It's just a really beautiful movie. I really recommend it. Peter Falk makes a cameo, one of my favorite actors, as an angel as well. Anyways, at the start of this film, there's this German language poem, which for whatever reason, it had kind of been like in my head the last week or two, and I wanted to check it up. And so I did. And this is the poem. It's originally in German. I found it just like on a website Googling for it, and I didn't see the translator, but I linked to that site. And definitely the magic of the poem is in this English translation. So whoever you are, translator, thank you. It's beautiful. So here we go. With that intro, Song of Childhood by Peter Handke. I think I'm saying that last name right. When the child was a child, it walked with its arms swinging, wanted the brook to be a river, the river to be a torrent, and this puddle to be the sea. When the child was a child, it didn't know that it was a child. Everything was soulful, and all souls were one. When the child was a child, it had no opinion about anything, had no habits. It often sat cross-legged, took off running, had a cowlick in its hair, and made no faces when photographed. When the child was a child, it was a time for these questions. Why am I me, and why not you? Why am I here, and why not there? When did time begin, and where does space end? Is life under the sun not just a dream? Is what I see and hear and smell not just an illusion of a world before the world? Given the facts of evil and people, does evil really exist? How can it be that I who I am didn't exist before I came to be? And that someday I, who I am, will no longer be who I am? When the child was a child, it choked on spinach, on peas, on rice pudding, and on steamed cauliflower, and eats all of those now, and not just because it has to. When the child was a child, it awoke once in a strange bed, and now does so again and again. Many people then seemed beautiful, and now only a few do by sheer luck. It had visualized a clear image of paradise, and now can at most guess. Could not conceive of nothingness, and shudders today at the thought. When the child was a child, it played with enthusiasm, and now has just as much excitement as then, but only when it concerns work. When the child was a child, it was enough for it to eat an apple, bread, and so it is even now. When the child was a child, berries filled its hand as only berries do, and do even now. It had on every mountaintop the longing for a higher mountain yet, and in every city the longing for an even greater city, and that is still so. It reached for cherries and topmost branches of trees with an elation it still has today, has a shyness in front of strangers, and has that even now. it awaited the first snow, and waits that way even now. When the child was a child, it threw a stick like a lance against a tree, and it quivers there still today. That was Peter Handke's beautiful poem, The Song of Childhood. So I've shared on previous Poetry Lockdown videos this idea of trying to make the familiar strange, which I think this poem does beautifully. It's one of the things I love about it. But I've also talked about this ability for poets to kind of have what I would call like an everyday mysticism, and almost turning something that we've looked at so many times into something like that sort of shimmers with a life and a light that we maybe didn't see before. And I feel like this poem does that for me. It allows us to kind of go back to those base original questions. Why am I me and why not you? Like the notion of an individual person all of a sudden just shines in this poem. And that kind of energy and enthusiasm, I think, is what I love about this poem so much. And I also love the fact that it kind of embodies that ideal that I've reflected on sometimes in these videos of the gospel, like Jesus says, unless you become like a little child, right, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And I don't think, at least by my reading of that gospel passage, that Jesus is saying like we go back to childishness, but I do think he's saying we need to get back to some of this wonder that this poem embodies. And I love the closing of it. I think that closing kind of the poem enacts the marriage of maturity and wonder at the same time. There's the line, and so it is even now. And as the poem closes, you've got berries filled its hand as only berries do, and do even now. The longing for an even greater city, and that is still so. So I think that really moves me, that not only does the poet enact the wonder, but also the mature human who is able to kind of have the wonder and also have the reality that sometimes things aren't always beautiful or ideal. So that's my 2 cents in this beautiful poem. Thank you, Peter Handke, for writing it. And whoever translated, again, thank you. And if you have not watched Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders, oh my goodness, do yourself a favor and check it out. It's just beautiful. It might make you cry. It did for me. All right. Hope you have a great Monday, a great rest of your week. Thanks for joining Poetry Lockdown.